think we might be live. Okay, it looks like we're live.
Okay,
And I'm not hearing any reverb, which is really great. Let me
maybe
just
it's,
make sure
maybe it's the peaceful park I'm in.
that's what it is. It's Charlie Brown.
It's Charlie Brown and the energy that I'm feeling right now. It's very calm and peaceful here.
Okay, yeah, we definitely are live. So welcome to another segment of A Day of Light and Love. And I get to be with my friend, Sharon Brewer. We've known each other for, I think, decades.
Yeah,
And Sharon is a extremely a dedicated nurse. That dedication, I mean, I always knew you were a dedicated nurse, but that dedication really showed, it shone through like light into kind of a shadowy or dark world during COVID. You never left the front lines. You
no,
were, by age, you were encouraged, excuse me, not to be on the
correct.
front lines. You never left the front lines for a year and a
Two
half,
years.
two
Yeah,
years.
almost 2 years.
Yeah,
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 almost 2 years.
yeah. And I think that I found that really inspiring, but I
Thank you.
realized that it wasn't done to be inspiring, which is what made it even more inspiring. So yeah. And you recently you've worked in geriatrics, right? Is that the
Correct. That's my passion. Yes.
for at least the last decade, right?
Yes.
But recently you transitioned into a little different aspect
I did.
because hospice nursing isn't always geriatrics,
No, it's not.
but it's always confronting the end of the life here as we know it.
Yes.
And I know that you wanted to talk about um, the quality of transition, reframing your words, but
It's okay. No, you're exactly right on the money. That's exactly what it is. This is kind of like my last thing on my bucket list of nursing to do. Hospice has always been on that bucket list. And throughout the years, I've dealt with hospice companies many times as a manager. I've gotten to know, exactly what they do and how they, comfort, doing all the things that they do. And I have been so overwhelmed with joy of learning so much more about them. Um, I just recently, well, okay, the reason I chose transition of life, there's a term in hospice when somebody gets it's kind of like the dash between birth and death kind of thing. There's that transition period. And I've told Jeannie, we've talked about it. That's always been my thing. I want to make that transition piece in the middle as comforting as possible, not only just for the patient, but my transition of life is for the family and or the friends, or if people are in facilities, the staff that are taking care of those people. And I think we've talked many times, because this is not just facility hospice. This is actually going into people's homes. So anyway, instead of we call it actually in the business, the transition of death, but I've termed for many years transition of life. I just, it's the transition of the afterlife of whatever plane that people believe in. Myself, of course, I'm a Christian and God's taken me home. It's that simple. So, yeah, anyway, that's a little piece of what the transition of life means for me. Um, I listened to most of your previous recording just now. I'm going to start out with this nugget that the vehicle and the keys, that's amazing. I'm going to absolutely incorporate that in what I do.
that's Severine.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was amazing. I really like that. I think that when, okay, I'm just going to speak on my experience. When I think when we first start out in whatever profession or whatever lifestyle or whatever you want to do, we start out with trying to glean the knowledge from wherever and trying to figure out how to apply it. I've learned over the years, it's the application. And you know where I learned that from? You.
Mm,
It's I don't want to say I learned it from you, but you encouraged it and you brought
mm,
forth that seed in me and it's grown so much.
mm,
I have learned that I don't have to know everything,
mm.
but I absolutely have to know where to go to tell you to get the answer. Um, that's been huge for me. Transition of life though.
Go
I
back to
had
what
a
you just said though, but there's a
mhm.
freedom in that, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. You know, that whole, you know, in the vehicle and keys, that's exactly the same analogy. I don't feel that heavy burden anymore. And that's, you know, it's something, and if you're not careful and you don't watch it, that burden can get back on you. You have to be ever constant of that and aware of it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Um, yeah. And I always talk about, you know, transition of life. I'm going to use an example about going in someone's home. And like we've talked about before, nursing homes are people's homes, but I'm talking about the actual home. I had a couple of weeks ago, I had a call. They asked me to go. It was in LaPorte and the patient was passing. And I called the wife ahead of time and she was there with a caregiver. And anyway, I had never seen this person before. You know, when you first walk into a home, you have like 30 seconds to analyze and assess and exactly what. So I call ahead and she was very pleasant on the phone. She said, yes, we're waiting. He's here. You know, I just need you to come and check him out. I was like, okay. I walk in the door and I literally didn't even have 30 seconds. The wife is standing in front of his hospital bed. He was deceased. I could see it. I could only see his head, you know, because she was standing next to him and talking to him. So that leads me into this. I there's a lot of theory out there about grief, but it's very easy for people who don't know stages to talk about Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the denial. There's an acronym. It's called DABDA: denial, anger, bargaining, acceptance. I'm sorry, depression and acceptance. This poor wife was completely in denial. He had really passed about 15 minutes before. She wanted me to take his complete set of vitals. But by the time, I'm going to fast forward this, you have, if you have all of this knowledge and you don't apply it, I'm using this story because if you have all of this knowledge and you don't apply it, you're not benefiting the person. You're not benefiting the honor and honoring the death. You're not honoring the life, you know. So I was able to sit her down, and by the time I left, it was good. It was good. I've been asked to do. I went into this business as a nurse in the field, and within a month they asked me to be a case manager, and now they've offered me. It's called a bereavement coordinator and grief counselor. And I really kind of thought about it. I'm like, do I really want to go into that realm? I took a couple of weeks and prayed about it. And when I went out on that call, that's when I made the decision. So that's why I tell you the story
So it
about
was
them.
evidentiary
It
confirmation.
was evidentiary confirmation. Absolutely. That was the evidence of what I needed to do. God put me exactly in that spot at that exact moment to hold that wife's hand and transition her into the life that she needs to start leading after the end of what his life was.
Exactly.
So it's transition of life. And a lot of people don't understand, you know, when you lose someone, the extension of the patient, you're treating the family as the patient. I call that a unit. So it's the patient is not just the patient, it's the whole unit. Children, fur babies, you know, just
And
spouses,
friends.
partners. So
Yeah.
yeah. but I term it transition of life. So
Can I just say what I just gleaned from what you
absolutely
spoke? So the transition of life is you're using it, it seems to me, on multiple levels.
correct.
So there's the transition of the individual
Mhm.
from their life in that dash to their passing.
Correct.
But there's a transition of life for those continuing to live in the physical realm.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's really a unit.
It's a it is.
It's a dance of sorts.
Mhm. Um, Something else that I've helped honestly through our mentoring and coaching. Um, how many times have you told me I bring the party? And I've embraced that.
Yes.
But you have to know when to use it too, though. But I've told you the same. I've a mantra that I've been using for years, and I've actually said this to you before. I attack everything with humor, but I can recognize a serious moment and treat it with a very tender heart and open mind. But everybody brings different skill sets to the table. You have to walk in and be authentic. You have to be authentic and transparent with families and the patients themselves. Um, it's not, I think when we see people in that, I'm only referring to hospice realm right now, okay? Um, there's a couple of different terms that we use also, and I've used this for years. It's anticipatory grief.
Mm.
Um, People in long-term care facilities, we've had this conversation. They are there, but they're getting them to transition that life is very difficult because they know that this is the last place they're ever going to live. Once somebody goes in a nursing home, that's the consensus anyway, about what people think about why they live where they live. So it's working on my transition of life has been a long, long process. And it's just something that I use,
And
and
it's
I've
taken
actually,
on a lot of different faces, so to speak.
hmm hmm
Like one of the things from the past that I've learned from you, um, because you worked in long-term healthcare facilities,
hmm
um, for at least a decade, that
hmm
the most recent decade of your previous to what you're doing now. But you teach you taught your juniors, your younger nurses. It was very important to respect. This isn't just a nursing home. This isn't just a facility. This is that patient's home for
correct,
now and maybe for the rest of their lives.
correct.
And to bring that level of respect and honor, um, energetically to the patient and their room and the culture. That was something I'd never even considered.
hmm
And when I was in high school, I was in a service organization, and we used to, every quarter, we had a different, it was a nursing home at that time, but we would go in there and, we would, maybe we're in the Christmas season, so maybe we would uh, we would carol or sing songs and bring treats, and back then they were a little more open about what
Yeah,
you brought in,
yeah,
But I never really considered it. It felt it's not a storage facility for old people or infirm people.
no,
And you brought that awareness to me. And I want to thank you for that, because I recently had a conversation with a client, and their parent uh, were in assisted living, but the mom now has had to go into full-time care, and
hmm
and the children were having, at least she was having difficulty seeing her mom in that realm, and what she felt was like reduced to. And I shared with her, oh my goodness, Of course.
Good morning.
I just have to bring the home. I have to not change the energy. It's my lens
Exactly.
that's changing the energy and will actually transfer to her in a positive way. Bring light, in other words. So I want to thank you for that because
Welcome.
I wouldn't have had that reference point without your input on that last
But
year, the year before.
you just so I don't remember exactly what you guys were saying a little while ago, you and Sabrine, but that once we get that knowledge, it's the sharing. I wanted to touch on that just a little bit too. You know, when we glean knowledge, whether whoever it's from, there has never been a time when I don't take care of a patient that I learned something new. It might be the same thing, but it might just a different reaction, different energy, whatever. But I think that where we're remiss in, you know, helping humankind is that we're not sharing that. It's you know, I don't want to talk to you. I just want to share my experiences. You know,
Mm.
I don't ever want to come across like I'm lecturing and I'm standing up in front of a classroom, and but it's just sharing that knowledge once you know, and once I share it with you, you can do whatever you want with it. It's just like you just talk to your client. I have taught that for years to my nursing students. You know, I always tell them, I can teach you skills, but I cannot teach you heart. I can give you what I know about my heart, about culture and, you know, dedication to making sure people are comfortable in their homes and that kind of thing. But it's what we do with our knowledge and how we share it. It's how we share it, not just when we share it. So yeah, but that transition of life, and believe me, we've all suffered loss. We've all suffered grief. One of the things about the transition too is that bereavement period where people are still grieving. There's no set time on that. We can't go in with a judgmental attitude either, you know. Um
I like
those five
something, I'd like
Go ahead.
something you said at that when you were talking about you have like 30 seconds to like assess.
Hmm.
And it reminded me that at some point of a human's arrival to living a life of a love lens,
Hmm.
we have to replace judgment with just assessment,
Correct. That's absolutely correct.
right?
Yeah. Yep.
And you were
You
talking
know,
about the 5 stages, so I
no,
interrupted.
I was saying, no. I was just thinking the five stages because that has to do with that. You know, it's not a cookie cutter process either. You know, it doesn't go from one to five and you're done. People jump around sometimes for years. And that's what I'm talking about being remiss. If we recognize that, even in our friends, our family, just to offer that hand and say, hey, you can talk to me, or here's some information. Here are some groups that you can attend that will be able to help you manipulate through those different processes. You know, that you can go from acceptance to denial like that. I think one of the things during the holidays, I learned this from a patient. Um, One of the things that holidays are so hard, she told me, is because those are the times that all the family gathered through. You know, everybody was together. Those were the most pleasant memories. Everything that they ever did together was with family. So she said, when holidays come, it's just awful not to have him here. I didn't think of that. So, you know, that's what triggers, I think, the memory days, I call them.
Yeah, or triggers the unnavigated grief path, because I think there's
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to say.
another layer of the path,
Correct.
right,
Yeah.
to navigate.
Yeah.
I'm not sure
So
it ever, if I'm not sure it ever completes until you're completed, you know?
I don't think so. I think that
Yeah.
you always, that's one of my beliefs too. I don't believe that because grief, you know, there's a grief process for, and I'll use that as an example. There's a grief process when somebody is in, they move to a long-term care facility. That's a loss. They've lost their life. They're still breathing, but they've lost their life. That's the way they see it. And
Or
it's
that version of their life.
correct. Oh, correct. It's just, so being able to recognize and help somebody manipulate through that, um, is key. It's just key. Don't we're going to try not to focus on what you can't do, but we're going to focus on what you can do.
Yes, there are probably some steps of choosing. And what brings to mind is there's a lot of grief. You deal with the grief of body death of a loved one,
Mhm.
right? When you're in the
Mhm.
hospice situation, you're attending to your stewardship is not just the patient, but
Correct.
that family and friend circle, the intimate circle that's connected to that. And then of course with bereavement, once that person crosses over and passes on, to manage the navigation of that path. But that same path is not um, unlike, well, it's not the same as, but yet at the same time, there's components that are not
Exactly.
different.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Divorce, job
Correct.
change,
Yep.
right?
And I was
Um,
going to touch on that. One of a seminar that stands out in my head, and it's so many years ago. I really don't even remember the woman's name or anything. But one of the things that I learned, because as a nurse and being young, I thought grief was dying. It was death. That was it. You grieve your death. No, everybody's loss is so personal. Like you just said, divorce, or if I lose a dog, a cat, a pet, anybody, loss is loss, and grief is grief, no matter what the loss is. Is that what you're trying to say too?
Absolutely. Like,
Yeah.
there are people who will go through the loss of employment, the loss of a job, the loss
Job.
of
Exactly.
a relationship, maybe not divorce, but a relationship that was important to them. It could be a romantic relationship, it could be a friendship. I recently had a conversation around a new mother. Now, this is something that I thought, now that is so interesting because as a new mother, the initial feeling is, yeah, there's this life and this new aspect of you that you tap into that never was really available to you before. There's no way to like live it. But there was also the death of the person who didn't ever have the responsibility of a child. That's interesting,
Yes.
isn't it?
That's very interesting. Yes.
I know. I thought that was really impactful. And there's a there's a movie. In fact, I said, oh, she said this. And I said, I've heard that before. Where have I heard that before? And I realized later on, I texted her and I said, oh, it's a movie that was on Netflix. And it's the movie is called Look Both Ways.
Okay.
It's interesting. You might have seen it. I might have recommended it to you. I don't know. But it's a young girl who as she's getting ready to graduate college, she takes a pregnancy test, and you get to see her life unfold with the pregnancy test negative and the pregnancy test positive. And you
Oh,
and
okay.
it's done extraordinarily
I'll
well.
have to watch. I haven't. No, I
It's
haven't
really
seen
good. I
it.
almost feel like maybe the third time I watched it, it was I finally got it. It was because there's two timelines
Hmm.
and it's bouncing back and forth between the timelines. I hope you watch it because then we can have a
I
great
will
discussion
absolutely.
around it. But I want to say it was in that movie that I went, that's such an interesting perspective. And then when this client was sharing with me that they had wrestled with this, like how do you wrestle with being excited about being a new mom and loving your child and yet feeling this void and this grief around your own self and because the identity shifts, right? And you can
Right.
never go back. And so I think grief is always a period where there's a gap, like a gap. There's a gap. There's a void. There's something that can never be
Absolutely.
lived in. Are you with
Absolutely.
me? It's gone. Whether it was the job, whether it was the
N-
relationship,
And
whether it was the kids.
and honestly, and I've worked with people too before, many times. Um, they don't want to get out of they don't want to get out of that step. If somebody is stuck, all I can do is give them deliver what I know and help them through it. But it's their choice, if that makes sense, to
Yeah.
stay in where they are. However, giving again, you and Severine talked a little bit at the end too about this. And you said fruit on the tree. I've learned so much from people over the years. You rank right up there. Um, find the person with the fruit on the tree. If I'm not getting through to you, I'm going to find someone. And that's why it's so important to know people's personalities. I'm going to go plug the personality plus book. Um, if I can't get through to you, I'm not going to be offended. And that's if you start making it about your own ego, you're doomed. You can't,
That's so good, Sharon. Oh my
yeah,
God.
you're not going to be able to do it. So take your ego out of the
Yeah.
equation and call Jeannie and say, Jeannie, listen, I've got this client that I can't, I think that you might be able to, get in touch with her or get through to her. I
And
think
if
that's so
I want to
important.
give a perspective on this,
Okay.
because I'm 3 years out now, three, 3.5 years almost
Uh-huh.
since Denny's transition.
I know.
And so, but here's what I learned about that. When you talk about like they're kind of, it appears that that they're stuck in a step or stuck in the acceptance
Hmm.
or the anger or, whatever. I
Right.
feel like I recognize at a certain point that I would remember you said that you revisit, like you get through it and then you
Hmm.
revisit and then you get
Hmm.
through and that can feel almost like early in that can feel like a roller coaster. It's very emotionally very
Yeah,
taxing
it
because
is.
you're literally doing that because you're at the effect point of it. You haven't seen it yet for like what it is, and that takes whatever time it takes.
It
But what
does.
I do think is that there was a time when I recognized that I did not want to let go of um the mourning,
Hmm.
MOURNING, the mourning point of grief. I learned that there's mourning and then there's grief. And mourning is for me, I can speak for me only.
Hmm.
Mourning was part of my grief path. I'm still on the grief path.
Hmm.
It isn't a one and done. But
No,
that
it's not.
period of mourning, it doesn't visit me very often anymore because I think at a certain point I recognized that the mourning stage, the emotional, there's a vibrancy of emotion, even though it's painful emotion. There's at least a vibrancy of emotion instead of, remember, the void.
Absolutely.
Are you
Yeah.
with me? So there's
Hmm.
this attachment, like you don't want to let go because somehow I think I was fearful on some level that to let go of that was to let go
Go of him.
of
Yeah.
that of him, that vibrancy of connection. But what I actually found to be true was by releasing, surrendering to the next step of grief recovery or bereavement, the
Hmm.
process, there was born a greater connection to
Exactly.
him, a more dynamic, greater, elevated connection. And
Exactly.
yeah, and I do think,
I love that because I've never put that into words, but that's exactly how I feel. Exactly.
yeah,
That's amazing. I've had people say this to me in different groups, that last part of acceptance and I'm doing good. That is still a step of grief. I mean, you're going to stay in acceptance. That's great. Just recognize that it's still a step. It's the last step, and it's where you want to be. Excuse me. Um,
But
I
it's
just
not
want
a
to.
one and done.
No, it's not.
No,
It's not
it's
because you
still
always have. Well, you have
acceptance is a
people.
dynamic energy inside of you.
Exactly. Exactly. And you can fill your void, and you fill it with all kinds of different things, and that's again us sharing knowledge that we know and just being authentic and transparent with people. You fill that void with so many other things that you eliminate thinking about that anymore. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and even more than that, I think it's okay to give yourself permission
Absolutely. I was
to
just going to say
fill
that.
yourself with whatever. For me, it was chocolate.
Yeah.
It was chocolate. Chocolate
That's
became
so
food.
funny. Oh, I have to go now.
Chocolate
I have to
became a
say,
food group for a while there.
you know me well. Do I like chocolate? Not really. I've been on a Hershey bar kick lately. What is that about? We're going to analyze that after the
That's
call.
so funny, but I do feel that there's being kind with yourself,
Absolutely.
not being too rigid.
Yeah.
And if you're around people who give you the suck it up cupcake, you got to change your circle or at least leave that circle for a while. You
Absolutely.
have to
You know,
find the
I,
nurturing energy that lets
yeah,
you go your own path and recover.
yeah. I well, you know my journey. I'll say this real fast. I know we have to go pretty soon, but I was open, how many years have I been working on getting out of God's chair? Get out of God's chair, Sharon. I had some health challenges at the beginning of the year. That's what forced me to have to leave my job. Um, so that's how, but then suddenly this whole door was open to me. I couldn't see it, and I was in a little bit of a funk for a while, but that was grief of loss of what I really wanted to do was be with my seniors. And this has just blossomed into something that I wasn't expecting. Um, I just have to give a plug real fast. I did a lot of research on the company that I started working for, their vision, all of it. And we have a small branch in Valparaiso. That's where I am. Um, this is the most dynamic group of people ever. I mean, from the office staff to the executive director, our patient care manager, the corporate people that come in. I mean, they all have the vision of comfort and love, and they're,
Mm.
you can feel the energy,
That's a very different corporate structure than the
it's,
last
to me, it
decade.
is. To me, it is. It's just amazing. Like, I mean, people have struggles. It's not perfect, but, um, when it comes to the end of the day, that's it. I mean, they're in. They're all in too. That's the thing. The nurses, they're all in.
Well, speaking of
All
all
in.
in, it's Christmas Day,
Yes.
and you're live streaming from your car. I'm
I am.
going to go see a patient
Mhm.
because I'm going to guess that you chose to work today so someone who had a family could be home with their family. Maybe
Yeah, kind
not.
of.
And maybe
Well, no,
not.
I'm not on call today. I'm just, going to do a favor for somebody. So
That's what I'm saying. You're you're
yes.
you're
Yeah,
filling
yeah,
in. You're filling in because that's what you do.
yeah.
Yeah. I want to really acknowledge that and validate you. The work that you're doing is really important work. And I feel like knowing you as I do, I feel like it's taken, like you get to bring forward now. It's like the keys in the
Yeah,
backpack that
exactly.
Severine talked about. You have this parking lot of, and the parking lot is filled with these parked cars from all these different experiences, good, bad, ugly, doesn't matter. And you got the keys in your backpack, and what you're doing now allows you, I feel like, almost to like draw on this smorgasbord of like, what does this person need? And I feel like it's not even always conscious with you. There's something called unconscious competence. And when you hit that, so it's funny how your health challenge pulled you out, it caused the end of something that you really didn't. I mean, you fought to not have that end. I heard you
Yeah.
say that. And yet at this,
remember the doctor had completely different ideas. So,
and
okay.
then to see this you were being invited to the next level of service
Yeah, I
that
was.
really only you could do. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. But I opened up this time, probably for the first time in a really, really long time. I didn't, overthink and, I just let it flow and the energy was there and it just
Surrender.
happened. Um, this year is also brought, I just want to let everybody know. Thank you all so much. Everybody on this live stream, in the next Jeannie has put this together for years. And actually remember, this was my third invitation. I love you for that. Thank you so much. Last year, I took a 3 a.m. spot, remember?
Yeah.
I took a 3 a.m. spot last year, ladies and gentlemen. And just a few minutes before I was supposed to come on live, we had a code. And it
Code
just
means
wasn't,
that a patient's heart has stopped.
yes. Oh, exactly. I'm sorry. Um, and it was interesting. But you know what? It was just the flow. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So, yeah, yeah.
As you are
But
now.
but this year is also, I used to, I am, I'm single. I don't have children. And, I used to disappear. I love that. Jeannie brought this word to me a long time. Please don't disappear. We love you. And I would just kind of go into myself and, be solitude. And now, am I still doing that? Pretty much, but I'm not disappearing. I'm appearing, actually. I love that. I've actually journaled that the other day. I'm like, no, I'm not disappearing. I'm appearing.
Yeah.
I'm just appearing in a different way.
Yes.
And I'm trying to navigate things in my life that I really want to do, which is getting back into a group of people that I'm very, very, very much in love with, those my other community of people. So yeah,
Well, thank
yeah,
you for sharing this time. I know you have to get on to your patient.
yeah.
Um, it's so interesting, Vanya, you'll have to watch her segment. Uh,
Okay.
we had the technological hiccups during her segment, so it took a minute, but once we got her, she was talking about grief. And it's interesting because you're talking about, the transition of life is really from grief moment to grief moment, I think.
That's correct. That's absolutely. I'm glad you said that. That's exactly the message I'm trying to. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a
And it's, you know
dynamic
what?
thing.
The other thing too is, giving not just giving myself permission, but giving someone else permission to feel the way they feel. I've said that to a lot of people over the years. Give yourself permission to feel anger or depression, or, you have to give yourself permission to get through it. So,
Yeah.
people, like say on a Christmas day, it's Christmas. It's Christmas. I can't feel that way today. I have to put on this face. Well, no, you don't. But if you want to do that again, that is you. Now, when people get to a point of self-destruction, we really need to step in and be a little bit more assertive with them. So, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I do
Well,
think that what you're saying there is really important because um acknowledging, like, we aren't always seen on the outside for what we're managing on the inside.
correct.
And that's okay. But giving yourself permission to feel however you feel and not making yourself wrong for either biorhythmically having a low day or feeling disappointment when you know you shouldn't feel, the quote, shouldn't, the should, they
The
say
should and should nots,
don't
right?
should all over yourself is often I was told
I
that
love that. I've never heard that. Okay.
I was told that by a member,
I'm going to
by
write
a
that down.
mentor, like, Jeannie, stop shoulding all over yourself. Like, no, just be authentically embrace where you are in the moment.
I'm
And
going to
it's
put
as
that
you
on a
feel.
pillow. I'm going to put that on a pillow and give it to you
Yeah,
as a
that's
gift.
well, I mean, that's not mine, but I apply it all the time. But, I do think that that's a very important message, that there's a level of like, to validate yourself
Mhm.
for whatever it is. That's living authentically.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
like you said, if you live in authentically starts to harm yourself or harm others, then it's really important to reach out for professional help to steer you back on the path of living authentically in a productive and fulfilling way. But there will be moments. There will be
Absolutely.
moments where we feel like we fall off the path. Just don't fall off the cliff.
Don't, there it is. There it
Yeah.
is. That's the whole message right there. That's my nugget for today.
Thank
I
you
love that.
for
Yeah,
for
it's true.
for yeah.
It's a process, but it's a process that I wouldn't give up or trade for anything. My my life has just been, it's my nursing, you know how I feel about it. It's just, it's my thing. It's my passion, it's my heart. So I just told somebody yesterday, have you ever been in a group? You're gonna understand what I'm saying. Have you ever been to a seminar somewhere where somebody stands up and says, do you have the kind of job that if you didn't get paid, you go back to tomorrow? Isn't that how we always ask that?
Yeah.
That would, I would say yes.
Yeah.
Well, I have to do something to, make money to eat, I guess, but no, I'm just kidding. But I would. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah.
It's just my passion. So
Yeah. Well, that's living your
I
purpose.
was, one of the young girls at work, her sister is 21 or 2 or something. And I didn't even know she was gonna, she asked me if I could talk to her sister. She's in nursing school. And she showed up at the office last week. I was in the office and at the table, and she came in and we had a mentoring session, just a spontaneous mentoring session. It was great.
Hmm.
So I loved it. It was fun.
Severine just said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Exactly.
And
That's
there it
exactly right.
was. And there it was.
And you know how I feel about education. I think we should educate. When we get the information, we need to share it.
And
God
there's
gives
nothing
us
like